the people of Grenfell Tower should be allowed to stay because they live here, regardless of whether they came here illegally, and their homes were there. They saw their friends and family burned, and now we are talking about removing them from the country because they don't belong here, even though they've suffered possibly the most horrific event of their lives. Why? What I'm trying to say is that if we had such an open policy, that the shadow of the way we believe immigrants, the finger that's been pointed towards immigrants, is fueled the discussion towards this in a time before, previous in another decade, this wouldn't have been a discussion. We would have seen victims, not illegal immigrants, and it's immoral. It's non-compassionate to talk to think back to your earlier callers. To think about putting them in the category with their loss. We would have let in everyone before, and we have done with the Belgians in the 1890s, not 1890s, during the war, and we have been a compassionate nation. I just don't understand.
I would just dispute one thing. I don't think we were ever really an open border country. Of course, there's been huge amounts of free movement. It isn't necessary, although you might argue differently from an economic perspective and indeed from other perspectives. I don't think we were ever really an open door country. I think it's probably been quite difficult for most people to get to this country over the years.
No, of course. I mean, in recent times that is true. What I refer to is the beginning of the 19th century, where we did open our doors. There wasn't really an immigration policy there to begin with. It gradually accumulated over time. And now we are in a position where that's the case. And the Tony Blair years, the allowing of people to come through the EU migration, for example, it scared people. And this country has never had a policy or a task force to encourage integration. They kind of leave it to the communities and say, oh, you can deal with it, you'll get on with them very fine. And when it gets bad, they then point the finger at them, and then people get angry and they use them as a scapegoat for everything. And it's just it's an easy way out of things that simply are the fault of individuals across different governments, but they blame the easy scapegoat, if that makes sense. I know that they haven't had an open door policy in recent years and recent decades, but what I hark back to is just that time before we had an immigration policy at all, where everyone was welcome, and it was the beginning of what's become now, where we look at people from Grenfell and we see. Some people see immigrants, not all, but people see immigrants. They don't see their tragedy, they see immigrants. Yeah. I find it distressing.
I find that distressing, Sean, as well, and I think you make your point in a very interesting way. Thank you for that.